The snow fell softly that December evening, each flake drifting down like a whispered secret from the heavens above. The air carried that particular crispness that only comes in the heart of winter, when every breath feels sharp and clean in your lungs, and the cold nips gently at the tip of your nose and the edges of your ears. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting warm golden pools of light onto the freshly fallen snow, making it sparkle like thousands of tiny diamonds scattered across the sidewalks and lawns of Maplewood Street. Sarah Mitchell stood at her living room window, her fingertips resting lightly against the cold glass, feeling the chill seep through to her skin. She was 32 years old, though tonight she felt both younger and older than that somehow. The warmth of the house behind her contrasted sharply with the winter scene outside, and she could hear the gentle hum of the furnace, the occasional creak of the old wooden floors, and somewhere in the distance, the muffled sound of Christmas carols playing from a neighbor's home. Her reflection stared back at her in the darkening window, a woman with tired eyes and brown hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She wore a thick cream-colored sweater that her mother had knitted for her years ago, back when things were different, back when Christmas felt like magic instead of just another day to get through. The sweater still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets she kept in her dresser drawer, a comforting scent that reminded her of simpler times. Behind her, the living room was modestly decorated. A small artificial tree stood in the corner, its branches adorned with mismatched ornaments collected over the years. Some were handmade, crafted by small fingers in elementary school art classes. Others were delicate glass baubles that caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. The tree lights blinked in a slow, steady rhythm, red and green and gold, and she could smell the cinnamon candle burning on the mantel, mixing with the scent of the pine air freshener she had hung on the tree to give it at least some semblance of authenticity. Sarah's daughter, Emma, was upstairs in her room. Sarah could hear the faint sound of music playing, some pop song that all the kids were listening to these days. Emma was 7 years old, with her father's bright blue eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. She was at that perfect age where Christmas still held wonder, where the possibility of magic still seemed real and tangible, where Santa Claus was as real as the snow falling outside. But this year was different. This year, money was tight, tighter than it had ever been. Sarah had been working double shifts at the diner on Main Street, coming home with aching feet and the smell of coffee and bacon grease clinging to her clothes and hair. The tips had been decent, but not decent enough. Not enough to cover the rent that had gone up in October. Not enough to cover the heating bill that seemed to grow larger with each passing winter week. And certainly not enough to give Emma the kind of Christmas that Sarah remembered from her own childhood. She thought back to those Christmases of her youth, when her parents were still alive, when the house would be filled with the scent of her mother's sugar cookies baking in the oven, the sound of her father's deep laugh as he struggled to untangle the strings of lights, the feeling of absolute security and joy that came from being loved and safe and warm. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, like scenes from a movie she had watched long ago. Sarah turned away from the window and walked across the living room, her footsteps soft on the worn carpet. She moved to the small desk in the corner, the one that served as her home office, bill-paying station, and catch all for the endless paperwork that seemed to multiply when she wasn't looking. She sat down in the creaky wooden chair and pulled open the bottom drawer, reaching past old tax returns and Emma's school papers until her fingers found what she was looking for. The envelope was small and plain, white with a slight yellowing at the edges. Inside was $347. She had been saving it for months, tucking away $5 here, $10 there, whatever she could spare from each paycheck. It was supposed to be for Christmas, for Emma's presents, for a nice dinner, maybe even for a small gift for herself, though that seemed selfish to even consider. But yesterday, the car had made a terrible grinding noise on the way home from work. The mechanic had looked at it this morning and delivered the bad news with a sympathetic grimace. The transmission was going. It would cost at least $400 to fix, maybe more. Without the car, she couldn't get to work. Without work, they would lose everything. Sarah held the envelope in her hands, feeling the weight of those carefully saved bills, and felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry. She had made her decision. The car had to be fixed. Emma would understand. She was a good kid, A smart kid, she would understand that sometimes life meant making hard choices. But even as Sarah told herself this, she felt the weight of disappointment settling in her chest like a stone. She had wanted so badly to give Emma a real Christmas this year. She had wanted to see her daughter's face light up on Christmas morning, wanted to hear that squeal of delight, wanted to feel like she was doing something right for once in this endless struggle to keep their heads above water. She placed the envelope back in the drawer and closed it with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the quiet room. Tomorrow she would take the money to the mechanic. Tomorrow she would fix the car. And tomorrow she would have to figure out how to explain to Emma that Christmas would be smaller this year, quieter, simpler. The sound of footsteps on the stairs pulled Sarah from her thoughts. She quickly wiped at her eyes and turned, forcing a smile onto her face as Emma appeared in the doorway. The little girl was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones covered in snowflakes and reindeer, and her blonde hair was still damp from her bath, smelling of strawberry shampoo. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah said, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. "You should be getting ready for bed." Emma padded across the room in her fuzzy slippers, the kind that made soft shuffling sounds against the floor. She climbed into Sarah's lap, even though she was getting too big for it really, and Sarah wrapped her arms around her daughter, breathing in that clean, innocent scent of childhood. "Mama," Emma said, her voice soft and sleepy, "do you think Santa knows where we live? We moved last year, remember?" Sarah felt her heart squeeze. They had moved last February, after the landlord had sold their previous apartment building. This place was smaller, cheaper, in a neighborhood that wasn't quite as nice. But it was home, and they were together, and that had to be enough. "Of course he knows," Sarah said, pressing a kiss to the top of Emma's head. "Santa knows where all the good children live, no matter where they move to." Emma was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could feel the little girl's heartbeat against her own chest, steady and trusting. Then Emma spoke again, her words careful and measured in that way children have when they're trying to say something important. "Mama, I know things are hard right now. I heard you talking on the phone last week about money. So if Santa can't bring me very much this year, that's okay. I understand." Sarah felt something break inside her chest, a sharp crack that made it hard to breathe. She held Emma tighter, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. How could a 7-year-old be so understanding, so mature, so willing to sacrifice her own happiness? It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. "Oh, baby," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to worry about that. You just need to be a kid and believe in magic and Christmas and all the wonderful things in the world." Emma pulled back slightly and looked up at Sarah with those impossibly blue eyes, eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul. "I do believe in magic. Mama, I believe in you." Those simple words, spoken with such complete faith and trust, nearly undid Sarah completely. She hugged Emma close again, rocking her gently back and forth the way she used to when Emma was a baby, when the world seemed simpler and the future seemed brighter. After a few minutes, Sarah carried Emma upstairs to bed, tucking her in under the thick quilts and smoothing her hair back from her forehead. She read her a story, something about a polar bear and a lost penguin, and by the time she finished, Emma's eyes were drooping closed, her breathing deep and even. Sarah sat there for a long moment, watching her daughter sleep in the soft glow of the nightlight, a small plastic star that cast gentle shadows on the walls. Then she leaned down, kissed Emma's forehead, and whispered, "I love you more than all the stars in the sky." She left the door open a crack, the way Emma liked it, and made her way back downstairs. The house felt too quiet now, too empty. She thought about turning on the television, but couldn't muster the energy. Instead, she returned to the window, looking out at the snow that continued to fall, heavier now, blanketing the world in white. The next morning arrived cold and gray. Sarah woke early, as she always did, to the sound of her alarm clock buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She reached over and slapped it off, then lay there for a moment, gathering the strength to face another day. The house was cold, the furnace not quite keeping up with the December chill, and she could see her breath misting in the air when she finally threw back the covers and stood up. She dressed quickly in jeans and a thick sweater, then padded downstairs to start the coffee maker. The machine gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the rich, bitter scent of brewing coffee, and Sarah stood there with her hands wrapped around a warm mug, staring out the kitchen window at the transformed world outside. Everything was white. The snow had continued through night, and now it lay thick and pristine across the yards and streets, unmarked except for a few bird tracks near the fence. The sky was still heavy with clouds, promising more snow to come, and the air had that muffled quality that comes with a heavy snowfall, as if the world had been wrapped in cotton. Sarah heard Emma stirring upstairs, and quickly set about making breakfast. Oatmeal with brown sugar and cinnamon, the cheap kind that came in the big cylindrical container. But Emma never complained. She ate it happily, chattering about school and her friends and the Christmas pageant that was coming up next week. After breakfast, Sarah bundled Emma up in her winter coat, the purple one that was getting a bit too small in the sleeves, and her knit hat and mittens. They walked together to the bus stop, their boots crunching in the fresh snow, their breath coming out in white puffs that hung in the cold air. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes and spray of slush, and Emma climbed aboard, turned to wave at Sarah through the window. Sarah waved back, watching until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then she turned and walked back to the house, her shoulders hunched against the cold. She had to go to the bank to withdraw the money from the mechanic. The thought sat heavy in her stomach as she drove the ailing car carefully through the snowy streets, listening to the ominous grinding sound that seemed to have gotten worse overnight. The bank was only a few blocks away, a small brick building with a drive-through window and a lobby that always smelled like old carpet and air freshener. Sarah parked and went inside, waiting in line behind an elderly man who was arguing with the teller about some charge on his account. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the window and asked to withdraw $350 from her savings account, leaving just enough to keep it open. The teller, a young woman with bright red lipstick and a name tag that read Jennifer, processed the transaction with efficient keystrokes. She counted out the bills carefully, then slid them across the counter along with a receipt. Sarah took the money, folded it, and tucked it into her wallet, feeling the weight of it like an anchor. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with someone coming through the door. She stumbled back, mumbling an apology, and looked up to see a man she didn't recognize. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a long, dark coat dusted with snow, and he carried himself with a quiet dignity that seemed out of place in their small town. "No harm done," the man said, his voice warm and gentle, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. He smiled at her, then held the door open as she passed through. Sarah mumbled another thank you and hurried out to her car, eager to get to the mechanic and get this unpleasant task over with. The drive took only 10 minutes, and soon she was pulling into the garage, a squat building that smelled of motor oil and rubber and old coffee. The mechanic, a burly man named Tom who had gone to high school with Sarah's older brother, greeted her with a sympathetic nod. He had the car up on the lift within minutes, and Sarah stood there in the cold garage, hugging herself and watching as he pointed out the problem, explaining in terms she only half understood about gears and fluid and metal shavings. The bottom line was what she had expected, $420. She felt her stomach drop. She only had $350. Tom must have seen the look on her face because he cleared his throat and said, "Tell you what, Sarah, you've been a good customer. I can do it for $350, and you can pay me the rest when you can. No ruse." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and handed over the cash. Tom promised to have the car ready by the end of the day, and Sarah left the garage on foot, walking back toward home through the falling snow. The walk took nearly 45 minutes, and by the time she reached her street, her feet were numb and her cheeks were burning from the cold. But the physical discomfort was almost welcome, a distraction from the emotional weight she carried. She had done what needed to be done. The car would be fixed. They would be okay. But Christmas would be different this year. Sarah spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, doing laundry, trying to keep busy and not think about the empty drawer where the Christmas money had been. She made a simple lunch of soup and crackers, eating it standing at the kitchen counter, while she looked at the mail that had arrived that morning. Bills, mostly. A cheerful card from her aunt in Florida. a flyer advertising a Christmas sale at the department store downtown, full of things she couldn't afford. When Emma came home from school that afternoon, bursting through the door with snow in her hair and excitement in her voice, Sarah pushed aside her worries and focused on being present. They made hot chocolate together, the cheap kind in the packets, but Sarah added extra marshmallows and a candy cane to stir it with, and Emma declared it the best hot chocolate ever. They sat together at the kitchen table, and Emma told Sarah all about her day, how they had practiced for the Christmas pageant, and she had been chosen to be an angel, how her friend Lily had shared her cookies at lunch, how the teacher had read them a story about a snowman who came to life. Sarah listened and smiled and asked questions, and for a little while the worry receded. That evening, after dinner, after homework, after bath time and story time, and tucking him into bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room with just the Christmas tree lights for illumination. She had turned off all the other lights, and the room was filled with a soft, colorful glow that should have felt magical, but instead just felt melancholy. She thought about what she could do for Christmas with no money. She could make things. Perhaps she was decent with a needle and thread. Maybe she could sew Emma a new dress, or make her a stuffed animal. She could bake cookies, even though the ingredients would stretch her grocery budget thin. She could wrap up some of Emma's old toys that had been put away and forgotten, make them seem new again. But even as she considered these options, she felt the inadequacy of them. Emma deserved more. Emma deserved magic and wonder, and the kind of Christmas morning that would become a cherished memory, not a reminder of hard times and making do. Sarah was so lost in her thoughts that she almost didn't hear the knock at the door. It was soft, tentative, barely audible over the sound of the wind outside. She sat up, confused. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Who would be visiting at this hour? She stood and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. On the porch stood the man from the bank, the older gentleman with the silver hair and kind eyes. He was brushing snow from his shoulders, and in his hands he held something she couldn't quite make out. Sarah's first instinct was caution. She didn't know this man, but something about his demeanor, the gentle way he stood there waiting patiently, made her feel that he meant no harm. She unlocked the door and opened a crack, leaving the chain on. "Yes?" she said, her voice uncertain. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, and it was such a warm, genuine smile that Sarah felt some of her tension ease. "I apologize for the late hour," he said. "My name is Henry Morrison. I believe you dropped something at the bank this morning, and I wanted to return it to you." He held out his hand, and Sarah saw that he was holding an envelope, her envelope, the white one with the yellowed edges. But that was impossible. That envelope was in her wallet, which was in her purse, which was hanging on the hook by the door. "I think you're mistaken," Sarah said slowly. "I didn't drop anything." Henry's smile didn't waver. "Please," he said, "just take a look." Something in his voice, some quality of absolute certainty and kindness, made Sarah close the door, unhook the chain, and open it fully. The cold air rushed in, along with a few snowflakes that swirled and danced in the porch light. She took the envelope from Henry's outstretched hand. It looked exactly like her envelope. Same size, same slight yellowing. But when she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside were bills. Lots of bills. She pulled them out with shaking hands and counted quickly. $500. 10 $50 bills, crisp and new. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, looking up at Henry with wide eyes. "This isn't mine. I didn't drop this." Henry's expression was gentle, patient. "Are you certain? I saw you at the bank this morning. You seemed troubled. And when I found this envelope in the parking lot shortly after you left, I was quite sure it must be yours." Sarah shook her head, trying to make sense of what was happening. "But I didn't drop anything. And I didn't have this much money. I only withdrew $350, and I gave it all to the mechanic." Henry tilted his head slightly, as if considering this. "Perhaps you miscounted," he suggested. "Or perhaps someone wanted you to have it. Either way, I believe it belongs to you now." Sarah stared at the money in her hands, then back at Henry. This felt wrong, like accepting charity, like taking something that wasn't hers. But at the same time, she thought of Emma, of Christmas, of the possibility of giving her daughter the kind of holiday she deserved. "I can't accept this," Sarah said, even as her fingers tightened on the bills. "It's not mine. It wouldn't be right." Henry reached out and gently closed Sarah's fingers around the envelope. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the right thing is to accept a gift when it's offered. Sometimes the right thing is to let someone help you. And sometimes the right thing is to believe that good things can happen, even when life has been hard." Sarah felt tears spilling down her cheeks now, hot against her cold skin. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what was happening. This stranger, this man she had never met before today, was standing on her porch in the snow, giving her money, giving her hope, giving her Christmas. "Why?" she managed to ask, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Henry's eyes grew distant for a moment, as if he were looking at something far away, something only he could see. "Because someone did it for me once," he said quietly, "a long time ago, when I needed it most. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would pass that kindness forward." He stepped back, preparing to leave, and Sarah suddenly realized she didn't want him to go. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to understand this mysterious act of generosity, wanted to somehow repay him or thank him properly. "Wait," she said, reaching out. "Please, at least come in for a moment. Have some coffee. Let me thank you properly." Henry shook his head gently. "That's not necessary. Your gratitude is thanks enough. But I will tell you one thing. Use that money to make Christmas special for your little girl. Make memories. Because in the end, that's all we really have. The memories of kindness, of love, of moments when the world felt magical." "How did you know I have a daughter?" Sarah asked. But Henry was already walking down the porch steps, his footsteps leaving deep impressions in the fresh snow. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," he called back over his shoulder. "And remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give is to accept help when we need it and to offer help when we can." Sarah stood in the doorway, watching as Henry walked down the street and disappeared into the swirling snow. She stood there until she was shivering, until the cold had seeped through her sweater and into her bones, and still she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Finally, she stepped back inside and closed the door, leaning against it with the envelope clutched to her chest. She looked down at the money again, half expecting it to have vanished, to have been a dream or a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But no, it was real, solid, $500 in crisp bills. Sarah walked slowly to the couch and sat down, spreading the money out on the coffee table in front of her. She counted it again, just to be sure. $500. Enough to give Emma a real Christmas. Enough to buy presents and a nice dinner, and maybe even a few decorations. Enough to create the kind of memories Henry had talked about. But more than that, it was proof that kindness still existed in the world. That strangers could care about each other. That sometimes, when you needed it most, help arrived in unexpected ways. Sarah sat there for a long time, just looking at the money and thinking about Henry and his words. She thought about his story, about someone helping him long ago, about the chain of kindness that stretched backward and forward through time. She thought about how she could pass this forward someday, when she was in a better place, when she had the means to help someone else who was struggling. Finally, she carefully gathered the bills and placed them back in the envelope. She would put it somewhere safe tonight, and tomorrow she would start planning. She would make this Christmas everything Emma deserved and more. That night, Sarah slept better than she had in months. She dreamed of snow and Christmas lights and a silver-haired man with kind eyes who walked through the world spreading joy like seeds. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed in the night. The sun reflected off the snow with such brilliance that it almost hurt to look at, and the world seemed scrubbed clean and new. Sarah woke with a sense of purpose and excitement that she hadn't felt in a long time. After taking Emma to the bus stop, Sarah retrieved the envelope and set out for downtown. The streets had been plowed overnight, leaving high banks of snow on either side, and the sidewalks were busy with people going about their morning routines. The air was crisp and cold, but the sun was warm on her face, and Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. Her first stop was a toy store on Main Street, a small independent shop that had been there since Sarah was a child. The bell above the door jingled merrily as she entered, and she was immediately enveloped in the scent of new plastic and cardboard and that indefinable smell of childhood wonder. The store was decorated for Christmas, with garlands strung along the shelves and a small tree in the corner covered in ornaments made from toy parts. Christmas music played softly from speakers hidden somewhere among the displays, and Sarah found herself humming along as she browsed the aisles. She took her time, considering each potential gift carefully. Emma had mentioned wanting a new doll, one of those ones that came with different outfits and accessories. Sarah found it on a shelf near the back, the box showing a smiling doll with long brown hair and a wardrobe of tiny clothes. She added it to her basket. Next, she found a craft kit for making friendship bracelets, something Emma had been talking about for weeks. Then a board game that looked fun for the two of them to play together on long winter evenings. A set of colored pencils and a sketchbook, because Emma loved to draw. A stuffed penguin, soft and huggable, because Emma had been fascinated by penguins ever since they had watched the documentary about Antarctica. Sarah moved through the store in a kind of joyful daze, adding items to her basket, calculating costs in her head, and for once not having to put things back because they were too expensive. She could afford this. She could give Emma a real Christmas. At the checkout counter, the owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun, who had run the store for 40 years, rang up Sarah's purchases with a knowing smile. "Someone's going to have a very Merry Christmas," she said warmly. Sarah smiled back, feeling tears prick at her eyes again. But this time they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I think she is." From the toy store, Sarah went to the bookstore next door and bought 3 new books for Emma, including one about a girl who goes on adventures with her dog. Then she stopped at the bakery and ordered a special Christmas cake to be picked up on Christmas Eve. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, Emma's favorite. She went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for a proper Christmas dinner. A small turkey, potatoes, fresh vegetables, cranberry sauce, ingredients for stuffing and gravy and pumpkin pie. She bought candy canes and hot chocolate mix and marshmallows. She bought everything she would need to make Christmas Day feel special and abundant. By the time Sarah made it home, her arms were laden with bags and her heart was full. She had everything in her bedroom closet, pushing the bags to the back where Emma wouldn't find them, and then she sat on her bed and just breathed, feeling the weight of stress and worry lifting from her shoulders. That evening, when Emma came home from school, Sarah suggested they go out for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a diner where Sarah worked, but it was a treat nonetheless. They sat in a booth by the window, watching the snow begin to fall again, and they ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes, and Emma talked excitedly about the Christmas pageant rehearsal and how she had learned all her lines. Sarah watched her daughter's animated face, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the way she gestured with her hands when she was excited, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the money that had made this possible, but for this moment, this simple dinner with her daughter, this ordinary evening that felt extraordinary. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah threw herself into Christmas preparations with an enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years. She baked cookies, filling the house with the scent of sugar and vanilla and cinnamon. She and Emma made paper snowflakes and hung them in the windows. They watched Christmas movies together, curled up on the couch under a blanket, drinking hot chocolate and laughing at the silly parts. Sarah wrapped presents late at night after Emma had gone to bed, taking care with each one, using pretty paper she had bought at the dollar store and ribbons she had saved from previous years. She arranged them under the tree, and each morning Emma would count them with wide eyes, marveling at how many there were. The Christmas pageant was held on the evening of December 22nd, in the school auditorium that smelled of old wood and floor polish, and too many people crowded into a small space. Sarah sat in the audience, her phone ready to take pictures, and when Emma appeared on stage in her angel costume, a white sheet draped over her shoulders and a tinsel halo perched on her head, Sarah felt her heart swell with pride and love. Emma said her lines perfectly, her voice clear and strong, and afterwards Sarah hugged her tight and told her how wonderful she had been. They went out for ice cream to celebrate, even though it was freezing outside, and Emma chatted the whole way home about how much fun it had been and how next year she wanted to be merry. Christmas Eve arrived with more snow and a biting wind that rattled the windows and made the house creak and groan. Sarah had the day off from work, and she spent it cooking and preparing, filling the house with warmth and delicious smells. The turkey went into the oven in the afternoon, and soon the scent of roasting meat and herbs filled every room. Emma helped where she could, stirring the cranberry sauce, mashing the potatoes, setting the table with their mismatched plates and the good napkins that Sarah had bought on sale last year. They worked together in comfortable companionship, the radio playing Christmas carols, the tree lights twinkling in the corner. As evening fell, Sarah lit candles around the living room, and she and Emma sat together on the couch, watching the flames flicker and dance. They read the Christmas story from an old Bible that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother, the pages thin and fragile, the words familiar and comforting. Then Sarah made hot chocolate, the real kind this time, with actual cocoa and milk and sugar, and they sat at the kitchen table and talked about Christmases past. Sarah told Emma stories about when she was a little girl, about the time her father had dressed up as Santa Claus and gotten stuck in the chimney, about the year it had snowed so much they couldn't open the front door, about the Christmas morning when she had gotten her first bicycle and had ridden it around the living room because it was too cold to go outside. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, and Sarah realized that this was what Henry had meant. This was the magic, not the presents under the tree, though those were wonderful, not the fancy dinner, though that was special, but these moments of connection, of sharing stories and memories, of being together and feeling loved and safe. When it was time for bed, Emma was almost too excited to sleep. She kept getting up, asking if it was morning yet, wondering if Santa had come. Finally, Sarah lay down next to her in the small bed, stroking her hair and singing softly until Emma's breathing deepened and she drifted off. Sarah stayed there for a while, watching her daughter sleep, feeling the steady rise and fall of her chest, listening to the soft sound she made. Then she carefully extracted herself and tiptoed downstairs to finish preparing for Christmas morning. She arranged the presents under the tree, making sure they looked abundant and festive. She filled the stocking she had hung on the mantel with small treats and trinkets. She set out the plate of cookies and glass of milk that Emma had left for Santa, and she ate one of the cookies and drank half the milk, leaving crumbs on the plate as evidence of his visit. Then she stood back and looked at the scene she had created, the tree with its twinkling lights and mismatched ornaments, the presents wrapped in colorful paper, the stockings hanging from the mantel, the candles casting a warm glow. It looked like Christmas. It felt like Christmas. It was everything she had hoped to give Emma. Sarah was about to head upstairs to bed when she noticed something on the front porch. Through the window, she could see a shape, a dark mass against the white snow. Curious, she opened the door and found a large box sitting there, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with twine. There was no note, no indication of who had left it or what it contained. Sarah looked up and down the street, but there was no one in sight, just the silent snow falling softly in the glow of the streetlights. She brought the box inside and set it on the coffee table, staring at it uncertainly. Should she open it? Should she wait until morning? The box was heavy, and when she shook it gently, she could hear things shifting inside. Finally, curiosity won out. Sarah carefully untied the twine and pulled away the brown paper. Inside was another box, this one white and unmarked. She lifted the lid. Inside were ornaments, beautiful, delicate glass ornaments in every color imaginable, red and gold and silver and blue and green, each one hand painted with intricate designs. There were angels and snowflakes and stars and bells. There were tiny villages and forests and animals. Each one was a work of art, clearly expensive, clearly chosen with care. Nestled among the ornaments was a small card. Sarah picked it up with trembling fingers and read the words written in elegant script. For your tree, and for all the Christmases to come. May your home always be filled with light and love. Remember to pass it forward when you can. Henry. Sarah sat down heavily on the couch, the card clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Henry, the mysterious stranger who had appeared on her doorstep with an envelope of money, the man who had given her the gift of Christmas, who had restored her faith in kindness and generosity and the goodness of people. She carefully lifted each ornament from the box, marveling at the craftsmanship, the beauty, the thoughtfulness of the gift. These weren't just decorations. They were heirlooms The kind of things you pass down through generations, the kind of things that became part of family tradition and history. Sarah spent the next hour hanging the new ornaments on the tree, interspersing with the old ones, creating a tapestry of past and present, of struggle and hope, of hardship and grace. When she was finished, she turned off all the lights except for the tree, and she sat in the darkness, watching the ornaments catch and reflect the colored lights, throwing tiny rainbows across the walls and ceiling. She thought about Henry, about his kindness, about his words. Pass it forward when you can. She made a silent promise to herself that she would. Someday, when she was in a better place, when she had the means, she would find someone who needed help, and she would give it freely, without expectation of repayment or recognition. She would be someone's Henry, someone's unexpected blessing. Sarah finally went to bed sometime after midnight, exhausted but happy, her heart full of gratitude and wonder. She fell asleep almost immediately, and she dreamed of silver-haired angels and snow that sparkled like diamonds and a world where kindness was the greatest gift of all. She woke to the sound of Emma's excited squeal. "Nana, Mama, wake up. Santa came." He came. Sarah opened her eyes to find Emma bouncing on the bed, her face flushed with excitement, her hair sticking up in all directions. Sarah laughed and pulled her daughter into a hug, breathing in the scent of sleep and strawberry shampoo and pure childhood joy. "Merry Christmas, baby," Sarah whispered. They went downstairs together, Emma practically dragging Sarah in her eagerness. And when they reached the living room, Emma stopped short, her mouth falling open in wonder. "Mama," she breathed, "look at the tree. It's so beautiful. When did you put all those new ornaments on?" Sarah smiled, thinking of Henry, of his midnight gift, of the magic that had transformed their simple tree into something extraordinary. "Santa must have brought them," she said, "as a special gift for us." Emma approached the tree slowly, reverently, reaching out to touch one of the glass ornaments, a delicate angel with golden wings. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered. They spent the morning opening presents, Emma exclaiming over each one, hugging Sarah after every gift, her joy so pure and complete that Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears again and again. The doll was perfect. The craft kit was exactly what she wanted. The books were wonderful. The stuffed penguin was immediately named Waddles and declared to be her new best friend. When all the presents had been opened and the living room was littered with wrapping paper and ribbons and boxes, Emma threw her arms around Sarah and said, "This is the best Christmas ever, Mama. Thank you. Thank you so much." Sarah held her daughter close, feeling the warmth of her small body, the trust and love that radiated from her, and she thought about how close she had come to not being able to give Emma this, how close she had come to disappointing her daughter, to failing at the one thing she wanted most to do right. But Henry had changed that. A stranger, a man she had met only once, had given her the gift of being able to give, and that, Sarah realized, was the true magic of Christmas, not the presents themselves, but the ability to show love through giving, to create joy, to make memories that would last a lifetime. They spent the rest of the day in comfortable contentment. Sarah finished preparing the Christmas dinner, and they ate at the kitchen table, just the two of them, but it felt like a feast. The turkey was perfectly cooked, moist and flavorful. The potatoes were creamy and rich. The cranberry sauce was tart and sweet. The pie was delicious, the crust flaky and golden. After dinner, they played with Emma's new toys, built friendship bracelets together, read one of the new books. They watched a Christmas movie and drank hot chocolate, and ate cookies until their stomachs hurt. They laughed and talked and simply enjoyed being together. As evening fell and Emma began to yawn, Sarah carried her upstairs for a bath. She washed Emma's hair, scrubbing gently with the strawberry shampoo, rinsing away the suds with warm water from the cup. She wrapped Emma in a fluffy towel and helped her into her pajamas, the ones with the snowflakes and reindeer. When Emma was tucked into bed, Waddles the penguin clutched in her arms. She looked up at Sarah with sleepy, contented eyes. "Mama," she said softly, "this really was the best Christmas ever. I love you so much." "I love you too, baby," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "more than you could ever know." She kissed Emma's forehead, smoothed her hair, and sat with her until she fell asleep. Then Sarah made her way back downstairs, turning off lights as she went, until only the Christmas tree remained lit, its glow soft and warm in the darkness. Sarah stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered street, at the houses with their lit windows and decorated yards, at the peaceful winter night. She thought about the past few weeks, about the journey from despair to hope, about the stranger who had changed everything. She wondered where Henry was now. Was he with family, celebrating his own Christmas? Was he alone, content in the knowledge that he had made a difference in someone's life? Was he even real, or had he been some kind of angel, sent to remind her that miracles still happened? Sarah didn't know, and in a way, it didn't matter. What mattered was the lesson he had taught her. That kindness was real, that people care about each other, even strangers, that sometimes, when you needed it most, help arrived in unexpected ways, and that the greatest gift you could give was not something you bought in a store, but the gift of hope, of possibility, of believing that tomorrow could be better than today. She made a promise to herself, standing there in the glow of the Christmas tree with its beautiful ornaments. She would remember this Christmas always. She would remember Henry and his kindness, and she would pass it forward, just as he had asked. She would look for opportunities to help others, to be someone's unexpected blessing, to spread kindness and hope wherever she could. The days after Christmas passed in a pleasant blur. Sarah returned to work at the diner, but somehow the long shifts didn't seem quite as exhausting. The tips seemed a little better. The customers seemed a little friendlier. Or maybe it was just that Sarah herself felt different, lighter, more hopeful about the future. Emma went back to school after New Year, and every evening she would come home and tell Sarah about her day, and they would play with her Christmas toys together, and Sarah would think about how lucky she was to have this little girl, this bright, kind, wonderful child who made every day better just by being in it. One evening in mid-January, Sarah was working the dinner shift at the diner when a young woman came in. She looked to be in her early 20s, with tired eyes and worn clothes, and she sat at the counter with a hesitant air, as if she wasn't sure she should be there. Sarah approached with a smile and a menu. "What can I get you?" she asked warmly. The young woman looked at the menu, then at Sarah, and Sarah could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the mental math of counting dollars and cents. "Just coffee, please," the woman said quietly, "and maybe a glass of water." Sarah's heart squeezed. She recognized that look, that tone. She had been there herself, not so long ago. The careful ordering, the choosing of the cheapest thing on the menu, the quiet desperation of trying to make every dollar stretch as far as possible. Sarah poured the coffee and set it down in front of the woman, along with a glass of water. Then she hesitated for just a moment before saying, "You know, we made too much soup today. The kitchen was going to throw it out, but I hate to see food wasted. Would you like some?" "No, Charlie." The young woman looked up, surprise and gratitude warring in her expression. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't want to be any trouble." "No trouble at all," Sarah said firmly. "And how about a sandwich to go with it? We got some bread that needs to be used up before it goes stale." She didn't wait for an answer, just went to the kitchen and prepared a bowl of hearty vegetable soup and a turkey sandwich on thick slices of bread with lettuce and tomato and cheese. She brought it out and set it in front of the young woman, who looked at it with eyes that were suddenly bright with tears. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "You have no idea how much this means." Sarah reached out and gently squeezed the woman's hand. "I think I do," she said softly. "We all need help sometimes. There's no shame in it." As the young woman ate, Sarah learned her story. Her name was Rachel. She had moved to town 3 months ago, looking for work, trying to escape an abusive relationship. She had found a job at a factory on the edge of town, but the pay was low and the hours were irregular. She was living in a tiny studio apartment that took most of her paycheck, and she was struggling to make ends meet. Sarah listened with compassion and understanding, and when Rachel had finished eating, Sarah went to register and pulled out 2 $20 bills from her own tips. She folded them and pressed them into Rachel's hand. "This is for you," Sarah said. "Use it for whatever you need. Groceries, gas, whatever." Rachel tried to protest, tried to give the money back, but Sarah closed Rachel's fingers around the bills. "Someone helped me when I needed it most," Sarah said. Now I'm passing it forward. And someday, when you're in a better place, you can do the same for someone else. Rachel left the diner that night with tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of gratitude and hope, and Sarah felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest, a feeling of rightness, of purpose, of being part of something bigger than herself. Over the following months, Sarah looked for opportunities to help others. Small things, mostly paying for the coffee of the person behind her in line, leaving extra large tips for servers who looked like they were having a hard day, donating clothes and toys that Emma had outgrown to the local shelter, volunteering at the food bank on her days off. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, felt like a way of honoring Henry and what he had done for her. Each time she helped someone, she thought of that snowy December evening when a stranger had appeared on her doorstep with an envelope of money and a message of hope. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal. The snow melted, revealing the brown grass and muddy earth beneath. Trees began to bud, their branches dotted with tiny green leaves. Flowers pushed up through the soil, daffodils and tulips and crocuses, splashes of color against the drab landscape. Sarah got a raise at the diner. Not much, but enough to make a difference. She was able to put a little money aside each month, building up her savings again, creating a cushion against future emergencies. The car continued to run, the transmission holding up thanks to Tom's expert repair work. Emma thrived, growing taller, losing a tooth, learning to read chapter books on her own. She made new friends at school and joined the soccer team, and continued to be the bright, joyful center of Sarah's world. Summer arrived with long, warm days and the smell of cut grass and barbecues. Sarah and Emma went to the park and flew kites and had picnics. They went to community pool and splashed in the water until their fingers were wrinkled and their skin was pink from the sun. They caught fireflies in jars on warm evenings and watched them glow in the darkness before releasing them back into the night. Fall came with its riot of colors, the trees turning red and gold and orange. Sarah and Emma went apple picking in an orchard outside of town, filling bags with crisp, sweet apples that they used to make pies and applesauce and cider. They carved pumpkins for Halloween, scooping out the seeds and roasting them with salt. And then, almost before Sarah realized it, it was December again. A year had passed since that magical Christmas, since Henry had appeared in her life and changed everything. Sarah found herself thinking about him more as the holiday approached. She wondered if he was well, if he was happy, if he knew how much his kindness had meant, how it had rippled outward, touching not just her and Emma, but Rachel and all the others Sarah had helped over the past year. She wanted to thank him properly, to tell him what a difference he had made, but she had no way to contact him, no address or phone number. She didn't even know if Henry Morrison was his real name, or if he had given her a false one to preserve his anonymity. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after Henry had left a box of ornaments on her porch, Sarah was decorating the tree with Emma. They carefully hung each beautiful glass ornament, Emma handling them with reverence, marveling at their beauty just as she had the year before. As Sarah hung the delicate angel with golden wings, the one that had been Emma's favorite, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart leaped. Could it be? Could Henry have returned? She hurried to the door and opened it, but instead of Henry, she found a young man standing there, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair and nervous eyes. He held a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, trying to hide her disappointment. The young man cleared his throat. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah said slowly. "Yes, I am." The young man smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more relaxed. "My name is David Morrison," he said. "I'm Henry's grandson. He asked me to deliver this to you." He held out the package, and Sarah took it with trembling hands. "Is Henry all right?" she asked. "Is he here?" David's smile faded slightly, becoming tinged with sadness. "My grandfather passed away 2 months ago," he said gently. "Cancer. He'd been fighting it for a while, but in the end, it was just too much." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Oh, no," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. He was such a kind man. He changed my life." David nodded. "He talked about you," he said, "in those last weeks. He told me the story of how he met you, how he gave you the money and the ornaments. He said it was one of the best things he'd ever done, that seeing your face when you opened the door, seeing the hope return to your eyes, it reminded him why kindness mattered. Sarah wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself. I wish I could have thanked him properly. She said, I wish I could have told him what his gift meant to me, how it changed everything. He knew, David said softly. He knew, and he wanted you to have this. He made me promise to deliver it to you on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after he gave you the ornaments. Sarah looked down at the package in her hands. It was small and light, and when she shook it gently, she heard a soft rustling sound. She looked up at David. Would you like to come in? She asked. Have some coffee or hot chocolate? David shook his head. Thank you, but I have other deliveries to make. My grandfather left gifts for several people, all to be delivered tonight. He planned it all out before he died. Wanted to make sure his tradition of kindness continued even after he was gone. He stepped back, preparing to leave, then paused. He wanted me to tell you something, David said. He said to tell you that you've done well, that he's proud of how you passed the kindness forward, and that you should keep doing it. He said the world needs more people like you. How did he know? Sarah asked, confused. How did he know what I've been doing? David smiled. My grandfather had his ways, he said mysteriously. He kept track of the people he helped, liked to see how they were doing. He had friends all over town who would tell him things. He knew about Rachel, about the others you've helped. He was very pleased. With that, David turned and walked down the porch steps, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway with the package clutched to her chest. She watched him get into a car parked at the curb and drive away, his taillights disappearing into the snowy night. Sarah closed the door and returned to the living room, where Emma was still decorating the tree, humming along to the Christmas music playing on the radio. Mama, who was that? Emma asked. A friend, Sarah said softly. Someone delivering a gift from a very special person. She sat down on the couch and carefully unwrapped the brown paper. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate designs of snowflakes and stars. Sarah lifted the lid and found a letter inside, along with something wrapped in tissue paper. She unfolded the letter, recognizing the same elegant script from the card that had come with the ornaments. The paper was thick and creamy, and it crackled slightly as she opened it. Dear Sarah, the letter began, if you are reading this, then I have passed on from this world to whatever comes next. I hope you'll forgive me for not saying goodbye in person, but I wanted my last gift to you to be a surprise, just as the first one was. I want you to know that meeting you was one of the great joys of my final year. Seeing your struggle, your determination to provide for your daughter despite the hardships you faced, it reminded me of my own mother, who raised me alone after my father died in the war. She worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, and she never complained, never gave up, never stopped believing that tomorrow would be better. When I was 10 years old, right before Christmas, my mother got sick. Pneumonia. She couldn't work, and we had no money for medicine or food or rent. We were going to lose our apartment, and I was terrified that we would end up on the streets. But then a stranger came to our door, an old woman I had never seen before. She brought food and medicine and an envelope of money, enough to pay the rent and see us through until my mother recovered. She said that someone had helped her once when she needed it, and she was passing the kindness forward. My mother recovered, and she never forgot that act of kindness. She made me promise that when I grew up, when I had the means, I would do the same for others. And I have tried, throughout my life, to honor that promise. Meeting you, helping you, it was my way of keeping that promise one more time. And seeing how you have taken that gift and multiplied it, how you have helped others in turn, it fills my heart with joy and hope for the future. Inside this box, you will find a key. It is the key to a safety deposit box at the bank downtown, box number 217. Inside that box, you will find enough money to secure your future and Emma's. Use it wisely. Use it to build a better life for yourself and your daughter. And when you are able, continue to pass the kindness forward. The world can be a hard and cruel place, Sarah, but it can also be beautiful and full of grace. It is people like you, people who choose kindness even when life is unkind to them, who make it so. Never stop being that person. Never stop believing in the power of a simple act of generosity to change someone's life. I wish you and Emma all the happiness in the world. May your Christmases always be filled with love and light and the magic of giving. With deep affection and respect, Henry Morrison. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. She carefully set aside and unwrapped the tissue paper, revealing a small brass key attached to a tag with the number 217 written on it. She sat there for a long moment, overwhelmed by emotion, by gratitude, by the sheer magnitude of Henry's generosity. He had given her so much. Not just money, though that was certainly life-changing, but hope, faith, and humanity. A reminder that kindness existed in the world, that people cared about each other, that one person could make a difference. "Mama, are you okay?" Emma asked, coming over to sit beside Sarah on the couch. "Why are you crying?" Sarah pulled Emma into her arms, holding her tight. "I'm crying because I'm happy, baby," she said. "Because someone very special gave us a wonderful gift, and I'm just so grateful." Emma hugged her back, then pulled away to look at Sarah's face. Was it Santa? She asked with child's innocent hope. Sarah smiled through her tears. "In a way, yes," she said. "In a way, it was." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room with just the Christmas tree lights for illumination, just as she had done a year ago. But this time, instead of feeling despair and worry, she felt peace and hope and a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about Henry, about his life, about the chain of kindness that stretched back to that old woman who had helped his mother, and forward through Henry to Sarah, and from Sarah to Rachel and all the others she had helped over the past year. She thought about the safety deposit box and what might be inside. Enough to secure their future, Henry had written. What did that mean? Enough to pay off debts? Enough for a down payment on a house? Enough for Emma's college education? Whatever it was, Sarah knew she would use it wisely. She would use it to build a better life for herself and Emma, and she would continue to pass the kindness forward, just as Henry had asked. The day after Christmas, Sarah went to the bank. She brought the key and Henry's letter, and she asked to access safety deposit box number 217. The bank manager, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a kind face, led her to the vault and used his master key along with Sarah's key to open the box. Inside was a large manila envelope. Sarah took it with trembling hands and carried it to a private room the bank provided for customers to examine their safety deposit box contents. She sat down at the small table, took a deep breath, and opened the envelope. Inside were several documents and a smaller envelope. Sarah looked through the documents first. There was a deed to a house, a small 3-bedroom home on Elm Street, just a few blocks from Emma's school. The deed was in Sarah's name. Henry had bought her a house. Sarah's hand shook as she set the deed aside and picked up the next document. It was a bank statement showing an account in her name with a balance of $50,000. $50,000. More money than Sarah had ever imagined having. There were also documents setting up a trust fund for Emma's education, with enough money to pay for 4 years of college at any school she chose. And there was a life insurance policy in Sarah's name, ensuring that if anything happened to her, Emma would be taken care of. Sarah sat there in stunned silence, unable to process what she was seeing. Henry had done all of this. He had secured their entire future. He had given them not just a Christmas, but a life. Finally, she opened the smaller envelope. Inside was another letter, shorter this time, in Henry's elegant script. Dear Sarah, it read, I know this is overwhelming. I know it seems like too much. But please accept these gifts in the spirit in which they are given. You and Emma deserve security and stability. You deserve a home of your own, a place where you can build memories and put down roots. You deserve to not have to worry about money, to not have to work yourself to exhaustion just to make ends meet. Use these gifts to build the life you've always dreamed of. And remember, the greatest gift you can give in return is to continue spreading kindness wherever you go. With love, Henry. Sarah sat in that small room and cried. She cried for Henry, for his generosity and kindness. She cried for herself and Emma, for the struggles they had endured and the bright future that now lay ahead. She cried for the beauty of human compassion, for the reminder that even in the darkest times, there were people who cared, who helped, who made the world a better place. When she finally composed herself and left the bank, the world looked different. The sun seemed brighter. The air seemed clearer. Everything seemed full of possibility and hope. Over the next few weeks, Sarah made arrangements to move into the house on Elm Street. It was a charming little place with a front porch and a backyard, and enough room for Emma to have her own bedroom. Decorated however she wanted. There was a kitchen with actual counter space, and a living room with a fireplace, and windows that let in floods of natural light. Emma was ecstatic about the move, running from room to room, planning where her toys would go, where they would put the Christmas tree next year, where she would do her homework. Sarah watched her daughter's joy and felt her heart swell with gratitude for Henry and his incredible generosity. Sarah quit her job at the diner, though she made sure to give proper notice, and to thank her boss for the years of employment. She decided to go back to school, to finish the nursing degree she had started before Emma was born. With the money Henry had left her, she could afford to be a full-time student and still provide for Emma. But even as her life changed, even as things got easier and more comfortable, Sarah never forgot Henry's message. She continued to look for ways to help others, to pass the kindness forward. She volunteered at the local homeless shelter, serving meals and sorting donations. She mentored young single mothers, shared her story and offering support and encouragement. She set up a small scholarship fund at Emma's school for children whose families were struggling financially. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, was a way of honoring Henry's memory and continuing his legacy. And Sarah found that the more she gave, the more fulfilled she felt. Helping others brought a sense of purpose and joy that no amount of money could buy. Years passed. Emma grew from a little girl into a teenager, then a young woman. She was smart and kind and compassionate, shaped by her mother's example and the story of the stranger who had changed their lives. She volunteered alongside Sarah, helping at the shelter, tutoring younger students, always looking for ways to make a difference. When Emma graduated from high school, she gave a speech at the ceremony. She talked about the importance of kindness, about how one person's generosity could change the trajectory of an entire life. She told the story of Henry, the stranger who had appeared on their doorstep one snowy Christmas Eve with a gift that had transformed their world. There wasn't dry eye in the auditorium when she finished. And afterward, several people approached Sarah to tell her their own stories of unexpected kindness, of strangers who had helped them in times of need, of the ripple effects of compassion and generosity. Sarah realized then that Henry's legacy extended far beyond just her and Emma. His kindness had inspired others, who had inspired still others, creating a web of compassion that stretched across the community and beyond. One man's simple act of giving had sparked a movement of generosity that continued to grow and spread. Emma went off to college on the scholarship Henry had set up, studying social work because she wanted to help people the way her mother had been helped. She called Sarah every week, full of stories about her classes and her friends and her plans for the future. Sarah, now in her 40s, continued her work as a nurse and her volunteer efforts in the community. She had become known as someone who helped people, someone you could turn to when you were struggling, someone who would listen without judgment and offer support without strings attached. She never remarried, though she dated occasionally. Her life was full enough with her work and her volunteering and her relationship with Emma. She had friends and purpose and the deep satisfaction that came from living a life of service and compassion. Every Christmas, Sarah would take out the box of ornaments Henry had given her and carefully hang each one on the tree. She would tell Emma, and later Emma's friends and the young people she mentored, the story of the stranger who had returned a lost Christmas gift, even though the gift had never really been lost at all. She would talk about how Henry had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, how his kindness had not only saved that one Christmas, but had changed the entire course of her and Emma's lives. She would talk about the importance of passing kindness forward, of being someone's unexpected blessing, of believing in the power of generosity to transform the world. And every year, on Christmas Eve, Sarah would make a point of doing something kind for a stranger. Sometimes it was paying for someone's groceries. Sometimes it was leaving a generous tip for a struggling server. Sometimes it was simply offering a smile and a kind word to someone who looked like they needed it. Each act was a way of saying thank you to Henry, of honoring his memory, of keeping his legacy alive. And each act created its own ripples, spreading outward in ways Sarah would never fully know or understand. One Christmas Eve, 20 years after Henry had first appeared on her doorstep, Sarah was volunteering at the homeless shelter, serving dinner to the people who had nowhere else to go on this holy night. She was ladling soup into bowls, smiling and chatting with each person who came through the line, when she noticed a young woman standing off to the side, looking uncertain and afraid. The woman was young, maybe early 20s, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that had seen better days. She held a small child, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 2 years old, and she looked like she was on the verge of tears. Sarah set down her ladle and walked over to the young woman. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Sarah. Would you like some dinner? We have plenty." The young woman nodded, not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry to be here. I just didn't know where else to go." "There's no need to apologize," Sarah said warmly. "That's what we're here for. Come on, let's get you and your little one fed." She led the young woman to a table and brought her a tray of food, soup and bread, and a piece of pie. She brought a smaller portion for the little boy, cutting up the bread into bite-sized pieces. The young woman ate hungrily, and Sarah sat down across from her, just keeping her company, not pushing for conversation, but making it clear that she was there if the woman wanted to talk. After a few minutes, the young woman looked up. "My name is Maria," she said quietly. "This is my son, Carlos. We've been living in our car for the past 2 weeks. I lost my job, and I couldn't pay rent, and the landlord kicked us out." Sarah's heart ached for this young mother, seeing in her the same desperation and fear she felt all those years ago. "I'm so sorry," she said. "That must be incredibly difficult." Maria nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I've been trying to find work, but no one will hire me because I don't have an address, and I can't get an address because I don't have money for a deposit. It's like I'm stuck in this cycle, and I can't get out." Sarah reached across the table and took Maria's hand. "I understand," she said. "I've been where you are, and I want you to know that it's going to be okay. You're not alone." She spent the next hour talking with Maria, learning her story, offering advice and resources. She gave Maria the names of organizations that could help, places that offered temporary housing and job placement services. She gave Maria her own phone number and told her to call any time, day or night, if she needed anything. But more than that, Sarah saw an opportunity to be for Maria what Henry had been for her, an opportunity to pass the kindness forward in a meaningful way. Before Maria left the shelter that night, Sarah pressed an envelope into her hand. "This is for you," Sarah said. "Use it to get back on your feet. Get a place to stay, buy some clothes for job interviews, whatever you need." Maria opened the envelope and gasped. Inside were 10 $100 bills, $1,000. She looked up at Sarah with wide, disbelieving eyes. "I can't accept this," she said. "It's too much." Sarah smiled, thinking of Henry, of his insistence that she accept his gift. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "Someone helped me once when I needed it most. Now I'm helping you. And someday, when you're in a better place, you can help someone else. That's how it works. That's how we make the world better." Maria started to cry, clutching the envelope to her chest. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means." But Sarah did know. She knew exactly what it meant. It meant hope. It meant possibility. It meant the difference between despair and a future. It meant everything. Over the following months, Sarah stayed in touch with Maria, helping her navigate the process of finding housing and employment. She connected Maria with a job at a hospital where Sarah worked, a position in the cafeteria that came with benefits and a steady paycheck. She helped Maria enroll Carlos in a good daycare program. She was there, offering support and encouragement, helping Maria build a stable life for herself and her son. And Maria thrived. She was a hard worker, reliable and conscientious, and within a year she had been promoted to a supervisory position. She moved into a small apartment, nothing fancy but clean and safe and hers. She started taking classes at the community college, working toward a degree in business management. And true to Sarah's words, Maria began passing the kindness forward. She volunteered at the shelter where she and Sarah had met. She mentored other young mothers who were struggling. She donated money to organizations that help homeless families. She became part of the chain of kindness that stretched back through Sarah to Henry, to the old woman who had helped Henry's mother, and forward into a future full of possibility. Sarah watched Maria's transformation with pride and joy, seeing in her the same resilience and determination that had carried Sarah through her own difficult times. And she thought about Henry, about how pleased he would be to see how his legacy continued to grow and spread, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. Emma graduated from college and got a job with a nonprofit organization that provided services to low-income families. She was passionate about her work, driven by the same desire to help others that had motivated her mother. She met a kind young man named Michael who shared her values and her commitment to making the world better, and they fell in love. When Emma got married, it was a small ceremony in the backyard of the house on Elm Street, the house Henry had given them. Sarah stood beside her daughter, watching her exchange vows with Michael, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. In her speech at the reception, Emma talked about her mother's strength and resilience, about the lessons she had learned growing up watching Sarah help others. And she talked about Henry, the stranger whose kindness had made all of this possible. "There's a man who isn't here today," Emma said, her voice clear and strong. "A man I never met, but who changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. His name was Henry Morrison, and 25 years ago, he gave my mother a gift that transformed our world. He gave us hope when we had none. He gave us a future when we couldn't see past the next day. And he taught us that kindness is the most powerful force in the universe." She paused, looking out at the gathered guests, at the faces of friends and family, and the many people Sarah had helped over the years. "My mother took that lesson to heart," Emma continued. "She has spent her life passing that kindness forward, helping others the way Henry helped us. And I hope to do the same. I hope to live a life that honors Henry's legacy, that spreads compassion and generosity wherever I go." There was a moment of silence, and then the guests erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, tears of joy and pride and overwhelming gratitude. That night, after the guests had gone home and the yard had been cleaned up, Sarah sat on the front porch of her house, looking up at the stars. The air was warm, carrying the scent of the roses that grew along the fence, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the sound of crickets chirping. She thought about the journey she had been on, from that desperate Christmas Eve 25 years ago to this moment of joy and celebration. She thought about all the people she had helped, all the lives she had touched, all the kindness she had spread. And she thought about Henry, about his wisdom and generosity, about the gift he had given her that went far beyond money or houses or security. He had given her a purpose. He had shown her that one person could make a difference, that kindness mattered, that the simple act of helping someone in need could create ripples that spread outward in ways you could never fully comprehend. Sarah closed her eyes and sent a silent thank you out into the universe, hoping that somehow, wherever Henry was, he could feel her gratitude and know that his legacy lived on. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges, new opportunities to help and to grow. Sarah became a grandmother when Emma and Michael had a daughter of their own, a beautiful little girl they named Grace. Sarah held her granddaughter for the first time and felt the circle of life completing itself, felt the continuation of the legacy of love and kindness that Henry had started. She told Grace the story of Henry, just as she had told Emma, just as Emma would tell her own children someday. The story of the stranger who appeared on a snowy Christmas Eve with a gift that changed everything. The story of how one act of kindness could transform lives and create ripples that spread across generations. Grace grew up hearing that story, understanding from a young age the importance of compassion and generosity. She saw it modeled in her grandmother's life, in her mother's work, in the way her family treated others. And she absorbed those lessons, making them part of who she was. When Sarah was in her 60s, she was diagnosed with cancer. It was treatable, the doctor said, but it would require surgery and chemotherapy and a long recovery. Sarah faced a diagnosis with the same strength and resilience she had shown throughout her life, drawing on the deep well of faith and hope that Henry had helped her discover all those years ago. During her treatment, Sarah was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from the community. People she had helped over the years came to visit, bringing meals and flowers and words of encouragement. Maria, now a successful business owner with her own consulting firm, organized a meal train and made sure Sarah never had to worry about cooking. Rachel, the young woman Sarah had helped at the diner all those years ago, now a nurse herself, came by regularly to check on Sarah and help with her medical care. The shelter where Sarah had volunteered for decades held a fundraiser in her honor, raising money for cancer research. Emma took time off work to be with her mother, caring for her with the same tenderness and devotion Sarah had shown her as a child. And through it all, Sarah felt the presence of Henry, felt his spirit supporting her, reminding her that she was not alone, that she was loved, that her life had mattered and made a difference. She recovered, slowly but surely, and when she was finally strong enough to return to her normal activities, she did so with renewed purpose. She had been given more time, and she was determined to use it well. Sarah started a foundation in Henry's name, dedicated to helping single parents and families in crisis. The foundation provided emergency financial assistance, job training, housing support, and mentoring programs. It was funded by donations from the community and by a significant portion of the money Henry had left Sarah, money she had invested wisely over the years, and that had grown substantially. The Henry Morrison Foundation became a beacon of hope in the community, helping hundreds of families get back on their feet, providing the same kind of support and encouragement that Henry had given Sarah all those years ago. And with each family helped, Henry's legacy grew stronger, his impact spreading wider, his message of kindness and compassion reaching more and more people. Sarah worked with the foundation until she was well into her 70s, finally retiring when her body simply couldn't keep up with her spirit anymore. But even in retirement, she continued to volunteer, to mentor, to spread kindness wherever she went. She spent her days with Emma and Michael and Grace, enjoying the simple pleasures of family life. She tended her garden, growing roses and tomatoes and herbs. She read books and watched old movies and took walks through the neighborhood, always stopping to chat with neighbors, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand. And every Christmas, without fail, Sarah would take out the box of ornaments Henry had given her. They were old now, some of them showing signs of wear, but they were still beautiful, still precious. She would hang each one on the tree with reverence and love, remembering the man who had given them to her, the stranger who had become her guardian angel. One Christmas Eve, when Sarah was 80 years old, she sat in her living room with Emma and Michael and Grace, now a young woman of 20, and Grace's boyfriend, a kind young man named James. They were decorating the tree together, hanging the ornaments and stringing lights and laughing at old family stories. Grace carefully hung the angel with golden wings, the one that had been Emma's favorite and had become hers as well. "Tell us the story again, Grandma," Grace said. "Tell us about Henry." Sarah smiled, settling back into her chair, a blanket across her lap and a cup of tea in her hands. She had told this story hundreds of times over the years, but it never got old. Each telling was a way of honoring Henry, of keeping his memory alive, of passing on the lessons he had taught her. She began the story, her voice soft but clear, painting a picture of that desperate Christmas Eve so many years ago. She described the snow falling, the cold seeping through the windows, the weight of worry and fear that had pressed down on her shoulders. She described the knock at the door, the silver-haired stranger with kind eyes, the envelope of money that had seemed like a miracle. She told him about the ornaments, about the letter Henry had left, about the safety deposit box in the house and the trust fund, and all the ways Henry had secured their future. She told him about his message to pass the kindness forward, and about how she had tried to honor that message throughout her life. And as she spoke, Sarah looked around at her family, at the faces of the people she loved most in the world, and she felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. Her life had been hard at times, full of struggles and challenges and moments of despair, but it had also been beautiful, full of love and purpose and the deep satisfaction that came from helping others. Henry had given her that. He had shown her that even in the darkest times, there was hope. That kindness mattered. That one person could make a difference. And she had spent her life trying to live up to that lesson, trying to be for others what Henry had been for her. When Sarah finished the story, there was a moment of reverent silence. Then Grace spoke, her voice thoughtful. "I want to do that. Grandma," she said, "I want to be like Henry. I want to help people the way he helped you, the way you've helped so many others." Sarah reached out and took Grace's hand, squeezing it gently. "You already are, sweetheart," she said. "You already are. Every kind thing you do, every person you help, every moment you choose compassion over indifference, you're carrying on Henry's legacy. You're making the world better, one act of kindness at a time." Grace smiled, tears shining in her eyes. And James, sitting beside her, spoke up. "I'd like to help too," he said. "Maybe we could volunteer with the foundation or find other ways to give back." Sarah felt her heart swell with joy and pride. "Yes," she said. "Yes, that would be wonderful. The world needs more people like you, people who care, people who want to make a difference." That night, after everyone had gone home and Sarah was alone in her house, she stood at the window looking out at the snow falling softly in the glow of the streetlights. It looked just like it had that night so many years ago, when Henry had appeared on her doorstep and changed her life forever. She thought about all the years that had passed, all the people she had helped, all the kindness she had spread. She thought about the foundation that bore Henry's name, about the families it had helped, about the ripples of compassion that continued to spread outward. And she thought about Henry himself, about the man who had given so much and asked for nothing in return except that she pass the kindness forward. She hoped he knew, wherever he was, how much his gift had meant, how it had transformed not just her life, but the lives of countless others, how his legacy of kindness continued to grow and spread, touching new generations, creating a better world. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered into quiet room, "Thank you, Henry. Thank you for everything. Thank you for showing me that kindness matters, that hope is real, that one person can change the world. I hope I've made you proud. I hope I've honored your gift by passing it forward, by helping others the way you helped me." And in that moment, standing in the warm glow of the Christmas tree lights, surrounded by the beautiful ornaments Henry had given her so many years ago, Sarah felt a presence. Not physical, not visible, but real nonetheless. A warmth, a sense of peace, a feeling of being loved and appreciated and understood. She opened her eyes and looked at the tree, at the angel with golden wings, catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. And she smiled, knowing in her heart that Henry was there with her, that he had always been there, watching over her, proud of what she had accomplished, pleased with how she had honored his legacy. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, making everything clean and new and full of possibility. And Sarah stood at the window, feeling the weight of years and the lightness of grace, knowing that her life had been a gift, that every moment had mattered, that the kindness she had received and given had made a difference. She thought about the chain of compassion that stretched back through time, from the old woman who had helped Henry's mother, to Henry himself, to Sarah, to all the people she had helped over the years, to Emma and Grace and all the future generations who would carry on the tradition of kindness and generosity. It was a beautiful thing, Sarah thought. A beautiful, powerful, transformative thing. One act of kindness, multiplied across time and space, creating ripples that spread outward forever, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured or understood. And it had all started with a stranger who appeared on a snowy Christmas Eve with an envelope of money and a message of hope. A stranger who had seen someone in need and had chosen to help, not because he had to, not because he expected anything in return, but simply because it was the right thing to do. That was the true magic of Christmas. Sarah realized, not the presents or the decorations or the fancy dinners, though those were nice, but the magic of human connection, of compassion, of choosing to care about others even when it costs you something, the magic of believing that the world could be better, and then doing something to make it so. Sarah turned away from the window and walked slowly through her house, turning off lights, checking locks, preparing for bed. She moved through rooms filled with memories, with photographs and mementos, and reminders of a life well lived. She saw pictures of Emma as a baby, as a child, as a young woman, pictures of Grace at various ages, growing from an infant to the beautiful young woman she was now. Pictures of the people she had helped over the years, the family she had supported, the lives she had touched. Each picture was a testament to the power of kindness, to the difference one person could make. Each one was a reminder that Henry's gift had not been wasted, that it had been multiplied and spread, and used to create more love and hope and compassion in the world. Sarah climbed the stairs to her bedroom, her steps slow but steady. She changed into her nightgown, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed. The sheets were cool and crisp, and she pulled the blankets up to her chin, feeling warm and safe and content. As she lay there in the darkness, waiting for sleep to come, Sarah thought about her life, about the journey she had been on, about all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the hard times and the good times, the struggles and the triumphs, the moments of despair and the moments of joy, and she realized that she wouldn't change any of it. Every experience, every challenge, every moment of difficulty had shaped her into the person she was, had taught her compassion and resilience and the importance of helping others, had given her a purpose and a mission, and a reason to get up every morning and try to make the world a little bit better. Henry had given her that, not just the money or the house or the security, though those had certainly helped, but the belief that she mattered, that her life had value, that she could make a difference. He had seen her at her lowest point and had chosen to lift her up, to give her hope, to show her that kindness was real and powerful and transformative. And Sarah had taken that gift and had run with it, had used it to help others, had passed it forward again and again and again. She had lived a life of service and compassion, and in doing so, she found more joy and fulfillment than she ever could have imagined. As sleep began to claim her, Sarah whispered one more thank you into the darkness. Thank you, Henry. Thank you for everything. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for showing me what really matters. Thank you for your kindness. And then she drifted off to sleep, a smile on her face, her heart full of peace and gratitude and love. Sarah lived for several more years, each one filled with the same kindness and generosity that had defined her life since that fateful Christmas Eve. She continued to volunteer, to mentor, to help wherever she could. She watched Grace graduate from college and start her own career in social work, following in her mother's and grandmother's footsteps. She attended Grace's wedding to James, a beautiful ceremony that celebrated love and commitment and the promise of a future built on compassion and service. And when Sarah finally passed away, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 84, the community mourned the loss of a woman who had touched so many lives. The funeral was held at the church on Main Street, and it was standing room only, filled with people whose lives Sarah had changed, whose burden she had lightened, whose hope she had restored. Emma gave a eulogy, her voice strong despite her tears. She talked about her mother's strength and resilience, about her unwavering commitment to helping others, about the legacy of kindness she had left behind. And she talked about Henry, about the stranger whose gift had started it all, whose act of compassion had created ripples that spread across decades and touched hundreds of lives. My mother used to say that Henry gave her more than money, Emma said, looking out at the gathered mourners. He gave her hope. He gave her a purpose. He showed her that kindness mattered, that one person could make a difference. And she spent the rest of her life trying to honor that gift, trying to be for others what Henry had been for her. Emma paused, wiping at her tears. And she succeeded, she continued. She helped so many people. She changed so many lives. She made the world better, one act of kindness at a time. And that is the greatest legacy anyone could leave. After the funeral, people gathered at the house on Elm Street, the house Henry had given Sarah all those years ago. They shared stories and memories, laughing and crying, celebrating a life well lived. And as the sun set and the guests began to leave, Emma and Grace stood together in the living room, looking at the Christmas ornaments that Sarah had treasured for so many years. "We should keep these," Grace said softly. "We should pass them down through the family, along with the story of Henry and Grandma, so that future generations will know about the power of kindness, about the importance of helping others." Emma nodded, putting her arm around her daughter. "Yes," she said. "Yes, we should. That's what Mom would have wanted, for the story to continue, for the legacy to live on." And so the ornaments were carefully packed away, to be brought out each Christmas and hung on the tree with reverence and love. And with each ornament hung, the story would be told again, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of the stranger who appeared on a snowy Christmas Eve with a gift that changed everything. The Henry Morrison Foundation continued its work, helping families in crisis, providing support and resources and hope. Grace eventually took over as director, bringing her own passion and energy to the mission. She expanded the foundation's reach, creating new programs and partnerships, always guided by the principles her grandmother had taught her. And in every family the foundation helped, in every life it touched, Henry's legacy lived on. His kindness, multiplied across time and space, continued to create ripples of compassion that spread outward, touching new lives, inspiring new acts of generosity, making the world a little bit better. Years turned into decades, and the story of the stranger who returned a lost Christmas gift became a legend in the community. Parents told it to their children. Teachers shared it in classrooms, and it was featured in the local newspaper every Christmas season. It became a reminder of what the holiday was really about, not the presents or the decorations, but the spirit of giving, of compassion, of caring for others. And somewhere in whatever realm exists beyond this one, Henry Morrison smiled, knowing that his simple act of kindness had created something beautiful and lasting, that his gift had been multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined, that his legacy would continue long after he was gone, inspiring future generations to choose kindness, to help others, to believe in the power of compassion to change the world. Because that is the true magic of Christmas. Not the snow or the lights or the presents under the tree, but the magic of human connection, of choosing to care about others, of believing that we can make a difference, the magic of one person reaching out to help another, creating a chain of kindness that stretches across time and space, touching lives in ways we can never fully comprehend. And it all started with a stranger who appeared on a snowy Christmas Eve with an envelope of money and a message of hope. A stranger who saw someone in need and chose to help. A stranger who understood that the greatest gift we can give is not something we buy in a store, but the gift of kindness, of compassion, of believing in someone when they have stopped believing in themselves. That is the story of the stranger who returned a lost Christmas gift, a story of hope and redemption, of struggle and triumph, of the transformative power of human kindness, a story that reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is light, that even when we feel most alone, there are people who care, that even when the future seems impossible, miracles can happen. And it is a story that continues to this day, in every act of kindness, in every moment of compassion, in every choice to help someone in need. It lives on in the hearts of those who heard it, and were inspired to pass the kindness forward. It lives on in the families helped by the Henry Morrison Foundation. It lives on in the ornaments that hang on Christmas trees, beautiful and delicate, reminders of a gift given long ago. It lives on in all of us, whenever we choose kindness over indifference, compassion over judgment, generosity over selfishness. Whenever we reach out to help someone who is struggling, whenever we offer hope to someone who has lost it, whenever we believe in the power of one person to make a difference, we are continuing Henry's legacy. We are honoring Sarah's memory. We are keeping the story alive. And that is the greatest gift of all. Not the money or the houses or the security, though those are certainly valuable, but the gift of knowing that we matter, that our actions have meaning, that we can make the world better. The gift of being part of something larger than ourselves, a chain of kindness that stretches across generations, connecting us all in a web of compassion and love. So this Christmas and every Christmas, remember the story of the stranger who returned a lost Christmas gift. Remember Henry and Sarah and all the lives they touched. Remember that kindness matters, that compassion is powerful, that one person can change a world. And then go out and be that person. Be someone's Henry. Be someone's unexpected blessing. Choose kindness. Pass it forward. Make a difference. Because that is what Christmas is really about. That is what life is really about. Not what we receive, but what we give. Not what we accumulate, but what we share. Not how much we have, but how much we help. And in the end, when our own lives come to a close and we look back on all we have done, may we be able to say, as Sarah could, that we lived a life of kindness, that we helped others, that we made a difference, that we honor the gift we were given by passing it forward, creating ripples of compassion that will continue long after we are gone. That is the true meaning of Christmas. That is the true magic of the season. And that is the legacy of the stranger who returned the lost Christmas gift.